The millionaire's son bit every nanny, but smiled at this maid. On a hill north of New York City, a luxurious mansion stood still in the morning fog. No laughter, no sound of life, only the wind whistling through glass windows and the hoarse cry of a small child. Ethan Walker, 34, founder of a leading tech corporation, sat motionless in his vast office. The monitor before him glowed with figures, reports, and million-dollar contracts. But he saw none of it. His eyes were fixed on the window, where he could see the latest nanny running through the gate, blood dripping from her arm. She was the 12th. In a year and a half, 12 nannies had left the Walker house, all bitten by 2-year-old Galvin. The home that once overflowed with warmth and laughter now held only silence. The living room remained immaculate, yet every object echoed the memory of Anna, the wife he lost in a car accident 18 months ago. Ethan once believed he could balance everything, his company, his grief, his child. But no algorithm, no fortune, could rewrite the heart of a broken child. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mrs. Cole, the housekeeper who had served the family for over 20 years, entered quietly. "Mr. Walker," her voice rasped, weary, "we need to talk about little Galvin." Ethan didn't turn. His gaze stayed on the window where the wind carried away the nanny's scarf. "What's left to talk about?" he asked, his voice low. "Sir, the situation's getting worse. This morning he bit the gardener. I think it's time to consider a special facility. There's one in Vermont that works with traumatized children." The words dropped into the room like heavy stones. "A facility?" Ethan repeated bitterly. "You're suggesting I send my son away?" "Sir, I only think he needs help we can't provide here." Ethan turned. His face was pale, eyes rimmed red from sleepless nights. "I already lost Anna, Mrs. Cole. I won't lose Galvin too. Not again." Mrs. Cole bowed her head. There were no words that could ease a father's pain, a man torn between guilt and love. "At least hire more help," she murmured. "He needs constant care. And you need rest." Ethan said nothing. He moved toward the photo on his desk, a picture of Anna holding newborn Galvin, her eyes glowing with tenderness. "You once told me children can feel what their parents feel," he whispered. "If that's true, then Galvin feels my despair." The child's cry echoed from upstairs, slicing through the heavy stillness of the mansion. Ethan looked up, pain flashing across his eyes. He knew that cry, not hunger, not fear. It was the sound of a small heart searching for something it had lost. And in that moment, inside the vast emptiness of his silent house, Ethan realized all the wealth in the world meant nothing if he couldn't make his son smile again. The next morning, the Walker mansion struggled to breathe again. Pale sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting a soft gold over the endless hallway. But the air remained heavy, an unnatural stillness, as if everyone inside feared waking the little monster upstairs. Clara Morales's car stopped at the iron gate. She drew a deep breath, clutched her worn canvas bag, and stepped out. 26, small-framed, her brown hair tied neatly, eyes bright not from confidence, but from courage built through years of hardship. Clara had just been hired as a full-time cleaning maid through a domestic agency. She never imagined setting foot in such a place: white walls, manicured trees, and silence so thick it felt alive. In the kitchen, Mrs. Cole gave her instructions. "You'll handle the east wing today. Don't go upstairs, especially the last room in the hallway. That's Galvin's room." Clara nodded gently. "Yes, ma'am." But by noon, the sound came again, from above, raw, cracked, endless crying. The whole house froze. The gardener dropped his tools. Mrs. Cole's hands tightened. Only Clara looked up, her eyes filled with quiet compassion. It wasn't the cry of a spoiled child. It was the cry of loneliness. Instinct guided her steps up the stairs. Each wooden board creaked softly beneath her feet. Near the end of the hallway, she heard toys clattering and muffled sobs. The door was slightly ajar. Clara hesitated, then slowly pushed it open. The room was beautiful, straight out of a magazine. Soft blue walls, tiny bed, shelves lined with toys. But in the middle of it sat Galvin, face flushed, tears streaking down his cheeks. Around him, broken toys lay scattered like fragments of his heart. When he saw her, the boy flinched, eyes wary like a cornered animal. "Hi there," Clara whispered, kneeling but keeping her distance. "I'm Clara. I'm just cleaning your room. Would you like me to tell you a little story?" Galvin didn't answer. Only his ragged breathing filled the air. Clara lowered her gaze and picked up a picture book near her feet. The cover showed a little yellow duckling. "Oh, this one's cute," she smiled softly. "May I tell you this one?" Galvin's dark eyes focused on the book. He didn't move closer, but he didn't resist either. Silence, his way of saying yes. Her voice floated gently, like spring wind. "Once upon a time there was a little duckling who lost his mother. He swam across the pond, crossed the fields, asking every animal, 'Have you seen my mom?' But no one answered. The little duckling was so sad. Her words flowed like water. The boy sat still, his breathing slowed. When Clara turned the page to the picture of the mother duck hugging her baby, Galvin's eyes shimmered. He reached out, a small, trembling hand, to touch the page. Clara's heart clenched. "You miss your mom, don't you?" she whispered. The boy said nothing, just tilted his head and crawled closer. When he was within reach, Clara opened her arms, slowly, gently. Galvin hesitated for a heartbeat, then collapsed into her embrace. She held him, softly, warmly. His tiny body trembled, then relaxed completely. The crying stopped. For the first time since Anna's death, the Walker house was filled with peace. The door to Galvin's room opened softly. A faint light from the hallway spilled in, gentle as dawn mist. Ethan Walker stood there, frozen in place. The child who had once terrified everyone, who had screamed himself hoarse and bitten anyone who came near, was now sleeping peacefully in the arms of a stranger. Galvin lay curled against her chest, breathing evenly, his face serene. As if for once the world had stopped hurting him. His tiny fingers still clutched at the fabric of her uniform, afraid that if he let go, she might disappear. The young woman looked up, her brown eyes widening in alarm as they met Ethan's gaze. Her cheeks flushed, her voice trembled. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. It's just—" I heard him crying. I couldn't leave the baby alone. Ethan raised a hand, motioning for her not to continue. His voice, low and hoarse, broke the silence like a breath of air. "It's all right. How long has he been asleep?" "About 10 minutes, sir." Ethan stepped inside, moving slowly as if afraid that even his shadow might shatter the fragile peace before him. He sat down on the edge of the bed, his eyes tracing every soft feature of his son's face. How long had it been since he'd seen Galvin so calm? No cries, no midnight fits, no trembling fists clenched in fear. Only a small boy sleeping soundly, his warm breath rising and falling against a stranger's chest. The woman hesitated for a moment, then spoke gently, as though afraid to touch a wound not yet healed. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, what really happened to him? The housekeeper said he has behavioral problems, but to me, he just looks like a child searching for someone to trust." Ethan exhaled a long, heavy breath that seemed to carry the weight of the whole world. His mother, Anna, died in a car accident when Galvin was just 6 months old. Everything fell apart after that. He became different, frightened. He bit everyone who came near, 15 nannies, 3 doctors, even the housekeeper. Every specialist I consulted spoke about trauma, attachment issues, therapy, but none of it helped. I even thought about sending him to a treatment center in Switzerland. The woman shook her head softly, her tone warm but steady. "You don't need to do that, Mr. Walker. I don't think Galvin is sick. He's just trying to protect himself." Protect himself? Ethan frowned. Yes, children who lose their mothers early often fear love, because for them, love always ends in loss. They learn to bite, to push away, to break things, not out of malice, but because they can't bear to be abandoned again. Maybe Galvin thinks that if he drives people away first, he won't have to feel that pain once more. Ethan went silent. All the expensive advice he had paid for suddenly felt hollow beside these simple, honest words. He looked at her, the small, composed figure, her hair tied neatly back, her calm eyes shining with something gentle and strong at once. Her voice carried the quiet resilience of someone who had known storms, yet never lost her kindness. "Then why didn't he bite you?" Ethan asked softly, curiosity and gratitude flickering in his eyes. The woman lowered her gaze, brushing a damp curl of hair from Galvin's forehead. "Maybe because I didn't approach him as an employee, but as someone who wanted to understand him. I didn't try to teach him how to behave. I just wanted him to know that someone was willing to stay." Ethan felt his chest tighten. He couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to him with such gentle strength. Moments later, Galvin stirred in her arms. His eyelashes fluttered open, and when he saw the woman, he didn't cry. He smiled, a small, trembling, luminous smile. Clara smiled back, whispering something that made the boy giggle softly. Ethan stood there, watching, and in that instant, he realized that light had returned to a house that had been dark for nearly 2 years. That afternoon, in his study, he turned to her and spoke quietly. "Miss Morales, if you're willing, I'd like to entrust Galvin's care to you for the next few days. I need to know if being around you truly makes him feel safe." Clara said nothing for a moment. Inside her, something shifted, a flicker of compassion, a delicate thread connecting her heart to the man standing before her. "Very well," she murmured. "I'll stay. For Galvin." 3 days later, the Walker mansion felt reborn. Galvin's cries no longer echoed through the halls. In their place came softer sounds, tiny footsteps on the carpet, playful babbling, and now and then, laughter ringing from downstairs. Mrs. Cole was still astonished. "That girl," she said to Ethan in his office, "there's something special about her. The boy never let anyone touch him. And now—" Ethan said nothing. He knew. He had seen the miracle himself. That afternoon, Ethan left work earlier than usual. For the first time in months, he didn't dread going home. As his car stopped at the gate, he heard laughter. Real laughter, not his own, but that of the little boy he'd once believed would never smile again. He followed the sound to the back garden. Under the golden light, Clara sat cross-legged on the grass, blowing soap bubbles. Galvin crawled around her, eyes wide with joy, as he chased the shimmering spheres floating through the air. "Well done, Galvin," she laughed, her voice bright as a bell. "You caught it," the boy squealed in delight, clapping his tiny hands. Ethan stood still, afraid to disturb the scene. The sunlight framed Clara's brown hair like a soft halo. It was simple, ordinary, and yet, to him, more precious than every $1,000,000 deal he had ever made. Clara looked up and met his eyes. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, then a smile, the kind that made something inside him ache. "Good afternoon, Mr. Walker," she said. "We were just playing a little." "No need to apologize," he replied softly. "This is the most beautiful sound this house has ever heard." She blushed, returning her gaze to Galvin. Ethan walked closer and sat beside them, his white shirt glowing faintly under the sun. "He laughs more now," he said quietly. "Yes," Clara replied. "Galvin is starting to feel safe. Children only laugh like that when they stop being afraid." Ethan studied her, his voice gentle. "And you? Were you always this kind with children?" Clara smiled faintly. "I grew up with 3 younger siblings. My mother worked long hours. I learned to rock babies to sleep when I was 12. And you never thought of studying child education?" She chuckled, not bitter, just honest. "When you have to choose between college and feeding your family, you pick the second one." Ethan fell silent. He had never imagined someone having to trade dreams for survival. For him, opportunities had always been there, waiting, but this woman was built differently. In her, he saw something money could never buy: kindness, resilience, and truth. Galvin crawled toward him and tugged his sleeve. "Dada!" Ethan froze. The word, the first since Anna's death, pierced and healed all at once. He looked at Clara, his voice trembling. "Did you hear that?" Clara nodded, her eyes shimmering. "He just called you Dad." Ethan pulled Galvin into his arms, holding him tight as tears streamed down his face. The boy giggled against his chest. Clara turned away, but something deep within her stirred. Not pity, but connection, real, fragile, and terrifying. One evening, after Galvin had fallen asleep, Ethan and Clara sat together on the sofa, watching the garden lights shimmer through the glass doors. "It's strange," Ethan murmured. "Just a few weeks ago, this house felt like an empty box. Now, I can hear laughter every day." Clara smiled softly. "Maybe a house doesn't need many people. Just a little love is enough." The simplicity of her words silenced him. Ethan looked at her and, for the first time in years, saw something in her brown eyes that he had long forgotten: peace. The next day, Clara made a suggestion. "Mr. Walker, I think it's time to take Galvin outside. Some fresh air, a few other children. It might help him realize the world isn't as frightening as he remembers." Ethan hesitated. He still remembered the panic attacks, the moments when Galvin bit out of fear. But then he saw the faith in Clara's eyes, calm, steady, radiant, and he couldn't bring himself to say no. "All right," he said finally. "Let's try." On Saturday afternoon, they took Galvin to the city park. The sun was gentle, the breeze carried the scent of new grass, and the sound of children's laughter filled the air. Clara sat on a bench and placed Galvin on the soft grass, letting him crawl freely toward the other kids. At first he hesitated, watching from a distance. Then a little girl approached and held out a red ball. Galvin looked at her, smiled shyly, and reached out to take it. "See?" Clara whispered. "Sometimes all it takes is someone patient enough to stay." Ethan stood a few steps behind, his heart softening as he watched. There was his son, the boy who used to cry alone in the dark, now smiling, playing like any other child. And beside him, Clara watched quietly, her gaze filled with a warmth deeper than any words he had ever heard. In that moment, Ethan realized he was falling in love with her. Not the kind of love born from passion or impulse, but something quiet, tender, like breath itself. A love that came from understanding, from nights spent sharing pain, from the way she made the world around him gentle again. Later, as Galvin dozed off in the car on the way home, Clara gently pulled the blanket over him. "He's come further than I ever expected," she said softly, pride glowing in her voice. "Not just him," Ethan replied, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, catching her reflection in the rearview mirror. "I have too." Clara turned toward him, surprised. She didn't answer, only tilted her head slightly, her eyes warm and luminous. And in that fleeting silence, 2 wounded souls seemed to find the invisible thread that finally bound them together. Since that afternoon, the atmosphere inside the Walker mansion had changed in ways no one could have imagined. The house that once felt heavy, haunted by silence and grief, was now alive with the sound of laughter, the hesitant notes of piano lessons Clara gave to Galvin, and the soft humming of her voice drifting from the kitchen each morning. Galvin could now run, speak, and laugh out loud. He slept peacefully through the night, no longer waking in fear, and every morning the first thing he did was run through the halls calling, "Miss Clara!" And Ethan, the man who once avoided his son's room like a shrine of pain, now woke earlier each day just to hear that laughter echo through the house. One evening, after Galvin had gone to bed, Ethan came downstairs. Clara was in the living room, quietly gathering the toys scattered across the floor. The warm lamp light wrapped around her shoulders, making her look like a painting, still, glowing, and heartbreakingly serene. He stopped at the doorway. "Do you always work this late?" Clara looked up and smiled. "Only when it's been a happy day." Ethan chuckled softly. "Happy?" "Yes," she replied, her tone like a breeze. "When I see Galvin smile, every bit of exhaustion feels worth it." Ethan said nothing. The light in her eyes stirred something deep inside him, a tenderness he thought had died with Anna. From that night on, he found himself inventing excuses to stay downstairs longer, to talk to her. They shared stories, small things, simple things, about their childhoods, their fears, their dreams. Clara spoke of her mother, a seamstress, and her younger brother Daniel, a college student struggling to stay in school despite their poverty. "My brother always says, dreams aren't something you wait for. They're something you walk toward," she said with a faint, wistful smile. "Maybe that's why I've never stopped trying." Ethan sat in silence, realizing how long it had been since he'd spoken so openly to anyone. He told her about the sleepless nights after Anna's death, about the terror he felt hearing his son cry, and about the countless mornings he'd sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at 2 cups of cold coffee. One night, Ethan stood by Galvin's door and watched. Clara was reading a bedtime story, her voice low and soothing, her hand brushing the boy's hair with such tenderness that it made his chest ache. For a moment, the whole world seemed peaceful again. Weeks later, Galvin began to babble new words. Papa. Mama. Every time he heard them, Ethan felt his throat tighten, his heart swell with something close to grace. But then, on a rainy afternoon, the doorbell rang. Clara was feeding Galvin and froze mid-motion. Outside stood a young man, thin, drenched, his eyes filled with fury. "Daniel?" she gasped, her heart skipping. "What are you doing here?" "I came to find you," the young man said, his voice trembling but sharp, "and to find the man who made the whole neighborhood talk about you." "What are you talking about?" "You really don't know?" Daniel scoffed. "They say you're being kept by a rich man, that he's paying my tuition, that he bought Mom a new sewing machine. I went to his office. They told me it's true. It was Ethan Walker's order." Clara's face went pale. "No, you're mistaken?" Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs, his tone calm but weary. "I was only trying to help. I never meant to offend you or put you in an uncomfortable position." Daniel's glare hardened. "Help? Are you sure, Mr. Walker? Do you even know what people are saying about my sister out there? That she's just a foolish maid living in a millionaire's fantasy? That she's your doll?" Clara stood frozen, her eyes brimming with tears. "Daniel, please, stop. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he shouted. "I see the way you look at him. You really think a man like that could love someone like you?" Ethan clenched his fists, his voice deep and firm. "Daniel, I don't know what you've heard, but if you want the truth, here it is. I love her, not out of pity. I love her because she saved my son. And she saved me." Clara stood trembling, her breath unsteady. Ethan took a step forward, his voice softening. "Clara." She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He's right. I can't stay." "Don't go," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "I need you. Galvin needs you." Clara met his eyes, full of pain, yet filled with strength. "Galvin needs his father, Ethan, and you. You need to find yourself before you can truly love someone else. I love you. But love built on guilt isn't love at all." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing motionless in the middle of the house that had just learned how to breathe, only to fall silent once more. That night, Galvin cried until he was exhausted, refusing to eat, refusing to sleep. Ethan sat in the darkness, staring at the photo on his phone, the one of Clara holding Galvin under the afternoon sun, both of them laughing. He tightened his grip on the phone, his vision blurring with tears. He knew then, losing Clara felt exactly like losing Anna all over again. 3 weeks had passed since the day Clara left. The Walker mansion, once filled with laughter, had returned to its familiar state, silent, sorrowful, empty. The mornings no longer carried the scent of baked bread or the soft hum of a woman's song from the kitchen. The sunlight still streamed through the windows, but no one drew the curtains anymore. Ethan often woke before dawn, sitting alone before a cup of cold coffee, listening to the sound of Galvin crying in the next room. The boy refused to eat, refused to sleep. Every night he still called out in his dreams, "Ma, Ma." Each time Ethan heard that voice, it felt as if something inside his chest tightened painfully. His friends noticed the change. He spoke less. His eyes looked tired, hollow. During a meeting one morning, Sophie Lynn, his assistant, looked straight at him and said softly, "Mr. Walker, there are wounds that work can't heal. They only start to mend when we allow ourselves to remember." Ethan looked up, surprised. She smiled faintly. "I once lost someone too. I know what that feels like." After the meeting, Sophie invited him to dinner. "Maybe an ordinary evening will help you breathe again," she said gently. The restaurant was elegant, lit by warm amber light. Sophie wore a black dress, graceful, poised, beautiful, in the kind of way that people would say perfectly suited Ethan Walker. They talked about work, about projects, about the things Ethan used to care about, but the more they spoke, the deeper the emptiness inside him grew. When she smiled, he suddenly remembered Clara's smile, imperfect, genuine, warm, and capable of making the world feel safe. Sophie caught the distant look in his eyes. "You're still thinking about her, aren't you?" she asked quietly. Ethan said nothing. She set her wineglass down, her voice calm but certain. "Go to her, Ethan, before it's too late." He looked at her, his vision blurring. Then he nodded slowly. When he stepped out of the restaurant, rain had begun to fall. He drove aimlessly through the wet, glistening streets, letting the wind and rain blur his view through the windshield. He didn't know how long he had been driving until he found himself in a small neighborhood in Brooklyn, the same one where he once took Galvin to play with Clara. A faint light shone through the window of an old apartment. He couldn't see her, only a white curtain swaying gently in the wind. But his heart began to race, as if it somehow knew she was near. He didn't step out of the car. He just sat there, staring through the rain. And for the first time in years, Ethan began to cry. Not because of loss, but because he finally understood that no matter how hard he tried, he would never be able to forget her. That night, Ethan returned to the mansion wrapped in silence. In his arms, little Galvin slept peacefully, his tiny face serene enough to break a man's heart. The soft glow of the night lamp brushed over the boy's fine hair, reflecting in the eyes of a father still damp with longing. Ethan bent down, pressed a gentle kiss to his son's forehead, and whispered, a promise meant only for the two of them. "Tomorrow we'll go find her, my son, because the place she belongs isn't out there. It's right here, in our hearts." The sky was fading into dusk as Ethan Walker drove out of Manhattan toward Brooklyn. Streetlights blurred through the thin rain. His hands gripped the wheel tightly, heart racing, not from fear, but from hope. He didn't know if Clara was still there. He only knew that if he didn't go tonight, he would lose her forever. The old Lavelle neighborhood appeared, quiet and worn, yet strangely warm to him. He stopped in front of a brownstone building, the place Clara once said she shared with her mother and brother. He stepped into the rain, holding a bouquet of white tulips, the flowers Clara loved, because they always bloom again, no matter how long the winter. The door opened. Daniel appeared, startled. "Mr. Walker?" "Hello," Ethan said softly. "I'm here to see Clara." Daniel crossed his arms, wary. "She doesn't want you to get dragged into trouble." "You're right," Ethan said. "But what I'm afraid of isn't trouble. It's losing the person who made me believe I could love again." Daniel studied him for a moment. For the first time, something gentle flickered in his eyes. "She's on the 3rd floor," he said quietly. "Last door down the hall." Ethan nodded and climbed the old staircase, the rain mixing with his heartbeat. The door opened after the second knock. Clara stood there, her hair loose, her face tired, eyes wide in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" "To say what I should have said long ago," Ethan replied. She stepped back, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't be here. The media, your company." "I don't care about any of that anymore," he interrupted, his gaze steady. "Clara, I've spent my life protecting my reputation, my wealth, my power. None of it ever made me happy. But you," his voice faltered, "you made me remember who I am." Clara looked down, tears falling. "Don't say that. I'm nobody, Ethan. You have the world, and I have nothing to offer." He stepped closer, taking her hand gently. "You have something the world never gave me. Peace. When you're near, I'm not empty anymore. I'm not afraid." Her eyes shimmered. "And Galvin?" "He needs you," Ethan said softly. "But not just him. I do too." Silence. The rain outside fell in rhythm with their hearts. Clara whispered, "Are you sure this is love, not gratitude?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "I've been grateful to many people, but only with you. I've found the courage to live again. If that isn't love, I don't think I've ever known what love truly is." The words broke through the space between them. Clara wept, and Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as if she might disappear into the rain. The door creaked. Galvin stood there, clutching his teddy bear. His eyes lit up. "Clara," he murmured, voice small but filled with emotion. Clara knelt down, arms wide. "Galvin!" The boy ran to her, hugging her tight. Ethan watched them, tears spilling freely, but this time not from loss, from finding home again. A week later, headlines spread everywhere. Billionaire Ethan Walker confirms relationship with former caregiver of his son. The media buzzed, the business world whispered. But Ethan didn't care. He stood beside Clara at the press conference, holding her hand, speaking calmly but firmly. "This woman saved my son, and she saved me. I have nothing to hide." Behind the curtain, Galvin ran toward them, grabbing both their hands, laughing brightly. In that moment, the flashes, the noise, the judgment, all vanished. Only family remained, a real family, bound not by blood or status, but by love and the courage to hold on to it.